Cleveland, Ohio, 1320 AM, 107.7 FM, WOBLradio.com, and available anytime on YouTube. It's time for the Everyday Ag Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Twining, and this is your connection to the everyday life of the backbone of America. Let's dive in to another ag venture. Well, hello and welcome back to another edition of the Everyday Ag Podcast. It's okay day for April, or March. Sorry, we're not even into April. I'm getting ahead of myself. It feels like April out there. Before we get started, I want to throw a quick shout out to all of my friends and colleagues in the dairy industry down in Columbus at the Ohio Spring Dairy Expo. Good luck and safe time down there, and don't have too much fun. This edition, we have our very first guests. I'm happy to have with me today Liz and Lee Merrill from out in Clarksfield. Liz was a Wellington High School graduate, and Lee a New London High School graduate, which we won't hold against either one of them. You got to go where you live. They grew up a mere 5 miles apart, roughly, from each other, but they didn't formally meet until 17, and then got married in 19, and now own and operate Merrill Farms right on State Route 18. And although they both started in what I like to claim as dairy backgrounds, even though they weren't really dairy backgrounds, they now focus on a very successful beef operation as well as a full-fledged crop operation. So without further ado, my very first guests on the Everyday Ag Podcast, Liz and Lee. Welcome, and tell us a little more about yourselves.
Hi, Patrick. Yeah, thanks for inviting us on the show tonight. We're looking forward to be able to share our story with your listeners. So my beginning probably is a lot like other people's beginnings in the fact that I got started out in 4-H. So I started out showing 4-H with, dairy heifers and steers, and then started showing beef steers, and finally bought my first beef shorthorn heifer like my junior year in high school. And that's where I really got hooked into agriculture and cattle and kind of worked on building and maintaining a small herd of about 8 to 10 head of mama cows while working here at the vet clinic for Dr. Cobb. I do have to start out by saying, too, I definitely wouldn't be involved in agriculture today without the help of my parents and family members. It's really hard to get into agriculture, and, there's definitely been a lot of help along the way, everything from my dad helping me build fence to, Dad and Frank making sure hay got made for the cows. So, and I'm sure Lee would agree, too, that, that really, it's hard to do it without the good support of a good family. So, but I personally never thought I would be anything more than just a hobby farmer with my little, 10 cows and 6 acres. And then I met Lee, but I'll let him tell you about his upbringing.
Yeah, just, kind of same thing. I was started on a small dairy farm that my parents owned. And once again, it is hard to get started in ag without somebody generations before doing a lot of the heavy lifting as far as land acquisition, stuff like that. Always knew that farming was going to be a major part of my life. Never really knew it was going to be full-time until I got tired of working full-time on the farm and off the farm, and decided to just go full-time farming. And I did corn, soybeans, hay, and dairy market steers when I first started. But there's nothing better than being your own boss, working the land, and just loving what you do.
Awesome backgrounds, and I will agree, without our parents, without any parents,
Sure.
or some sort of background to get started, especially today's day and age, to just come from, say, the city or the suburbs and say, hey, I'm going to buy a bunch of land and animals and equipment and get rolling. Good luck.
It's a huge capital, yeah.
Huge. So let's take a quick moment before we get too carried away and tell the listeners about their options from you guys for purchasing beef.
Yeah, absolutely. So we offer whole, half, and quarter beef. We have appointments every month with Tom Keller out in Litchfield. We also offer smaller bundles, so like we can do beef bundles for you, or if you just want 10 pounds of ground beef or a couple packages of steaks, we can do that too. We even have novelty items like smokies, jerky, beef bologna. So as far as how you can get a hold of us, we do have a Facebook page. You can look us up on Facebook and message. I'm sure we can get Patrick to put our phone numbers in the notes at the end of the show if you want to give us a call. We're a little old-fashioned, so we don't mind people giving us a call and ordering the beef that way too. But if you're also in New London, you can stop into the gas depot there in town. They carry our beef. The White Pine Mercantile out on Route 60. She carries our beef. And, if you can't get out to the farm and maybe you live a little ways away, we are part of an online farmers market called Market Wagon that delivers directly to a customer's door. Now, keep in mind, it is a little more expensive than buying directly from us because they have commissions and delivery fees and things like that. But, if you just can't get out to the farm to pick it up, that's always an option, too.
So tell us about Merrill Farms today.
Yeah, so Lee was already obviously farming full-time when he met me, but I don't know that he realized how much extra work he was going to pick up with my little hobby farm and my 15, 20 acres of rented hay ground and whatnot.
That we still rent
yep,
today.
That we still rent. So, and I'll let him tell about the rest of the farm because that's kind of his baby.
Rented or purchased ground is so hard to come by just by price, but we have managed to pick up a little bit more for conventional row crop farming and a little bit for extra hay acres, but still very much considered a small farm. We're obviously trying to do our best with the limited acres to maximize production and profit since the costs are so high for inputs and extra acquired land. Like for instance, when we plant wheat, we add clover seed with our fertilizers, so we get hopefully 2 cuttings, maybe 3 out of that clover crop, and that adds extra organic matter to the soil and nutrients, reduces the use of herbicides, and attracts pollinators like bees and things of that sort to help get a better pollination rate. And we need all the extra hay that we can get with the number of cows, because her 10 cows is now grown to a 23?
Something like that.
23 to 25 cows that we breed, and we usually try to keep around 2 herd bulls for them. So on top of that and the fat cattle pens, we stay pretty busy with that.
So how many acres owned and rented are you running? Roughly.
If you count all the pastures that were taken out of rotation for
Sure.
that, and all the hay ground, I'm going to say it's probably around that 550, 560 acre.
Okay.
Give or take.
And how many acres are in rotation as far as, beans, wheat, corn, regular crop ground?
Probably right about 500, 520, somewhere around in there.
Cool. Well, let's take a quick break. We're right at that 10-minute mark. And as Liz mentioned earlier, they send all of their beef over to Keller's, so it's perfect time for a Keller break. Brought to you in part by Keller Meats in Litchfield, just north of the Circle on State Route 83. They are your prime destination for all your locally sourced beef, pork, lamb, and goat custom processing, as well as a full retail counter. Go to kellermeats.com or visit them on Facebook for more information. All right, welcome back. We're talking with Liz and Lee Merrill of Merrill Farms. Lee, let's talk about what you guys are super passionate about, the cattle.
For sure. That Nothing makes us happier than just going out to the barnyard, looking, just watching, pay attention. If there's one that doesn't look quite the same as it did even earlier in the day, we're very good about taking temperatures and monitoring health. They deserve the best life that they can get, even though there are cows meant to feed people, but they deserve the respect that everybody else deserves. So that and I guess that brings to just the quality of feed. We get all of our feed is, the recipes are designed by a cattle nutritionist that he does it for a living. It's so they're corn fed, well fed, all the hay that they can eat. So I guess it just goes back to health, and that creates a better carcass in the end.
Sure. Liz, do you want to key on that a little bit on the carcass qualities?
Yeah. I mean, we've that's kind of what we've based our herd around, So we've got a herd, like Lee mentioned earlier, of about 23 or so shorthorn cows, and to give a little history of the shorthorn breed, they are a maternal breed, and that's one of the things they're known for. Like, since many people probably aren't familiar with shorthorns, they're a British breed like Angus or Hereford, which probably more of your listeners are familiar with. But in addition to those maternal qualities, the other quality that they really kind of excel in is the carcass quality, so your marbling and your tenderness. So that's kind of what we select our bulls and our cows for. We focus on those maternal qualities, those carcass qualities like marbling, while still trying to increase our ribeye area and yield grades, and obviously keeping in mind calving ease, because if they don't have a calf every year, you can't sell a calf. So if you're losing calves because they're having trouble having them, that's not a good thing. But yeah, I mean, our cows aren't coddled. We kind of expect them to do it on their own and do it on, raise a calf on grass and hay. The cows themselves don't get grain. The mama cows don't. We feed, the grain goes to the steers, the ones we're trying to finish for freezer beef. But those mama cows don't get that. They got to have a calf and breed back every year on hay and pasture alone. So we do utilize rotational grazing, though, which is so how rotational grazing works is we have our bigger pastures, right, with our permanent fence, but then we take some lighter movable fence and we break them down into smaller chunks, and those cows and calves spend no more than a week in each section before they go to a new one, which kind of forces them to eat the grass more evenly. And since grass wants to start regrowing after 7 days, and you're pulling those cows and calves off of there, it gives that pasture section a good chance to recover and to start growing without putting too much stress on it. So, but if you've ever talked to me about my cattle before, or I should say now at this point our cattle, now that I'm not just me any longer, I've always said we don't breed for show. We just really try to aim for those sound, functional, eye-appealing cattle. We're retaining top daughters in our herd or selling them to other breeders. And same thing with bull calves. If we've got some really promising bull calves, we'll retain them for future herd sires. But the rest of them go to our freezer beef operation. So I'll let Lee kind of touch on that since he's the main workhorse on the farm.
We like shorthorns because, for one, it's just a beautiful breed of cattle. Excellent carcass factors at a young age. That being said, there's nothing wrong with any breed of cattle, whichever you prefer. And like I said before, the way you feed them makes a big difference in how the carcasses you get to the finish with the marbling and fat layers and things like that you want, or that most want for better tasting beef.
And the other day when I was out at your guys' place, you were saying that you can't feed them too much grain because they'll get too fat too quick. Is that right?
That is true. Our nutritionist tells us that when we start creep feeding the calves, that they should be getting anywhere from 2 to 3% of their body weight per day of a higher protein feed. We can't feed ours like that because they just start putting on finish immediately at weaning. and and at that point, it's good that they want to get fat, but we end up with small framed carcasses that if they would have to go to the auction, they don't sell good because they're small, they're lightweight, they're finished, eat well,
Tastes good,
but
Right.
but they're not worth the dollars.
Yeah, so we have to feed them a little slower.
So tell the listeners where your, let's say, end date is, weight and age-wise.
We prefer that like 12 to 14 month, maybe 13 depending on the animal, and because not every one is the same.
Yeah, some aren't ready till 16. But
And we shoot for a 1,300 pound live weight, which generally yields an 800 to an 825 pound carcass.
Yeah.
It just makes it really nice to break it down into quarters or halves or whatever people want if you're dealing with a more even number.
Yep.
And that seems to be kind of the break between just right on the fat and too much if they get a little heavier.
Sure. And then none of your, or correct me if I'm wrong, as far as your feedlot animals, do they get any pasture?
No.
Not once they're weaned. Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
when they're baby calves out with mom, they're out on pasture, and even the animals we have to purchase, because for as many freezer beef as we run, they're not all being born on our farm. We
Right.
we purchase some from other local farms and from the auction barn, but most of those beef calves, when they're born until they're weaned, which is somewhere between 4 and 7 months of age, those calves are out with mom on pasture, and then when they get weaned, they get acclimated to the grain ration, whether it's our calves or ones we purchase, they get acclimated to that ration, and then then they're on that grain ration. They're not on pasture at that point.
But they're not overcrowded in the pens, but we like them in the pens. We want them eating calories, not burning them off running the pastures.
Yeah, but they still get hay. So
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you said, they're ruminants, so they need grass.
But they're not out exercising.
Right.
Liz and Lee are going to be back on the show because they've intrigued me with something they just started with in ribeye area scanning. Did I say that right?
Pretty close.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
So they're able to ultrasound their live animals to check that ribeye area to see where they're at. We're going to have a whole nother show just on that. And I also want to talk to them then about the misnomer, if you will, of grain-fed as opposed to grass-fed, because as a cutter, I see it every day, and you can eat grass-fed animals if you want to. I don't like chewing on shoe leather.
Now, I will say, Ryan, one of your coworkers there, he actually complimented one of the grass-fed that we send in not too long, because we do, even though we mostly grain feed, we do offer a little bit of grass-fed beef. And he says, dang, that's really a good-looking carcass for grass-fed.
And we actually went and looked at her, and looking at her hanging in the cooler, usually the grass-fed has more of a yellow tint to the fat. She did not.
Wow.
She was one of our younger herd cows that just wasn't making the cut. So
and I think that's a little bit where the big difference in grass-fed versus grain-fed comes from, right? Is like you said, usually the fat will have a yellowish tint to it. There's usually a lot less marbling, because what it is the higher amounts of vitamin A in the diet that comes from a strictly grass-fed diet actually inhibits their ability to marble. So you're going to see less marbling, which is the little bits of fat in the meat that make it taste
good.
Yeah. But but so your grass fed's going to have like a more robust, like stronger, like beefy flavor, and some people like that. I honestly, we eat a little bit of both at home. So just like there's no right or wrong breed, I suppose there's also no right or wrong way to feed it. And if you like grass fed,
by all means, you should have that opportunity to buy it and
absolutely.
eat it.
It takes all kinds to make the world go around, and there's all kinds out there. So, we prefer grain-fed, but like I said, we do offer a little bit of grass-fed because we know there's people out there that that prefer that.
For us, the grass-fed is a significantly smaller market, but we still have people asking for it. So
Sure. Let's take one last quick break, and then we'll be back to discuss more with Liz and Lee. Have you heard about the creamy delight waiting for you at Carlisle Creamery? Introducing their small herd share program, bringing you the finest raw milk straight from the happiest pasture-raised cows north of Route 20. At Carlisle Creamery, the Hamkers believe in the purity of nature. Their cows graze on lush green pastures, producing milk rich in flavors and nutrients. Join their herd share and experience the goodness of farm-fresh, raw milk right in your own home. Get to know your producer and their cows personally and see firsthand where this wholesome product is being produced. Become a part of the Carlisle Creamery family today. Look them up on Facebook or email them at carlislecreamery@gmail.com. Taste the difference at Carlisle Creamery, where every sip tells a story of pure, wholesome goodness. And always remember, know your producer. Welcome back once again, the Everyday Ag Podcast, and we're talking with Liz and Lee Merrill. Liz, what else is going on?
Yeah, so in the spirit of Everyday Ag, what's happening right now on the farm, what has been happening, and what's coming up. So since we have, the cows and calves, winter is not a slow time for us. I know you've kind of touched on that in other shows, how a lot of times, farmers use winter as a maintenance time or a, repair time, catch-up time, but we calve in the winter since we're not in the field, right? So, winter is not exactly slow for us. We're about 2/3 of the way through calving. We usually start around the end of January, beginning of February. So we've got our last group of cows here coming up. Hopefully by Saturday we'll start having a couple more calves and one straggler in May. So this means obviously we're getting ready for breeding season. So cows are getting their pre-breeding vaccines. Some of them are going to get some AI service, which I know you've got
a good breeder.
Got a good breeder. We've got that all lined up for probably a future show, and we're probably even going to do a little bit of embryo transfer. I used to do that years ago. We're going to try it again this year. But honestly, most of them are going to get, bred to our new herd bull, which we're really excited about that we got last year. We're planning on using them a little more heavily, and a young one that we raised on the farm ourselves that we're hoping to try out. But one other really cool thing, and we already kind of briefly touched on it, like you said, is we collected those yearling ultrasound carcass data, right? So that's when the ultrasound technician, he comes out and he takes ultrasound pictures of that rib, and he measures he sends it back to the lab. They measure the ribeye, they measure the amount of fat in, the intermuscular fat, which is the marbling in that rib, and then they measure the thickness of fat over the 13th rib and over the rump area. So yeah, we're kind of excited. Maybe I think that'd be a really good future topic. We'll kind of dive into that a little bit deeper, especially once you guys start harvesting these animals at Tom's and see what those, compare the actual animal on the carcass to the, to the data that we collected. We're really excited to kind of see how those things correlate. So.
And that fascinates me. I'm super excited to see them come in hanging and see how that all correlates.
Yeah, for sure.
Lee, what else is going on?
Ultimately, we're not that much different than any other farm, especially on the smaller side. We tend to, since we normally don't have the capital to have hired hands and things like that, so we broaden our shoulders a lot just to carry the load that the cattle need for their needs, especially since we're trying to sell quality beef. Their needs come before ours. We don't eat until they've been taken care of. Just advocating for agriculture, it seems to be almost a dying breed anymore. If you're not a mega farm, you work for one if you want to be an ag. We're a lot of info in a short amount of time, but talking about farming is you can never get too deep into the topic, especially if you're really passionate about it. You can just ramble on for
sure
for days and days.
And we do that too much, don't we?
Yeah.
Yes.
A couple weeks ago over at the meat shop, they stopped in on I think it was a Saturday morning, right?
Yeah.
Something, yeah.
And we were talking about this upcoming show, and I think it was 45 minutes plus.
Every bit of that.
And we were way down the rabbit hole of what we were going to talk about. And like I said, we'll definitely be having Liz and Lee back with us at a future date whenever I can figure out that. But it's been a pleasure having both of you on. And you'll be back again, whether you like it or not.
Oh, yeah. Well, we appreciate you.
Yeah, this is a wonderful opportunity for us to get our name out and do what we can to help the ag community.
And as we wrap up this episode, as we always do, don't forget that you can check out this episode and any other episode of the Everyday Ag Podcast on the YouTube channel. That's Everyday Ag Podcast, or now on Spotify, if that's your flavor of listening. And we're diving into a couple other different listening apps, I guess, if you will. And don't forget to check out the Facebook page. If you're on Facebook, that's the ButterPig Partners Facebook page, or the Merrill Farms Facebook page. I'll have the links on the description on YouTube on that, plus Liz and Lee's phone numbers if you want to reach out to them, and maybe even an email address if you want to email them about getting orders. And per usual, don't forget to check out the clothing, if you will, the merchandise on Crafty Dawn Boutique, however you want to say that. In the search icon, just type in Everyday Ag Podcast. We've got the koozies, men's and women's tees, as well as sweatshirts. And if any of you want your very own freezer-ready ButterPig, we have halves and wholes available starting here in April. We've been cutting them here the last couple weeks, but we've got more going in here in April, and I have some openings. So if you'd like a half or a whole of those tasty, delicious pigs, feel free to reach out. You can always comment on the YouTube page, shoot me a message on Facebook, or email me at butterpigpartners@gmail.com. And as always, if you ever care to be a podcast sponsor, shoot me an email message, what have you, and we can talk about that opportunity. It's been fun having Liz and Lee on. Like I said before, it's always a fun time having guests. I get to sit back and relax and watch them shaking their boots. But it's been fun, and in April, we've got another set of guests coming on that are also kind of in that beef industry operation with Lee and Hannah Vogel, who also have their own pig operation. And Hannah also has some draft horse background. So we're going to pick on them about all those aspects. And there are another couple that may end up coming back on to dive in deeper about what's going on out on the Western Ohio side of things. So, as always, it's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Stay warm, stay safe, and always stay adventurous. Until next time, take care.
The proceeding was a paid informational program. The views and opinions expressed were not necessarily those of the staff, management, or advertisers of WOBL Radio.